Linda McMahon was also out. Big action on Friday with the president dismantling within the law the Department of Education. And here's the cool thing. This is what she said about what the overall goal is.
Our goal is to make sure that we are providing the best education for students in our country. We cannot be last in the world in education because we are impacting our national security. We are impacting those next second and third generations that are coming along. It is up to us and our responsibility to make sure we are giving them the best access to education.
Now, keep in mind, the left and the media want to talk about this Department of Education and all these kids that are going to be at risk. Here's what Trump and the team are doing. And it goes back to something that Reagan started talking about in the 80s. We're just actually sending the money and the authority back to the states, to local authority, so that you, who could probably meet your school board, go to a meeting, see them in your communities, in your neighborhood, can affect change, can talk about curriculum, issues, concerns. But what the president did over the weekend was awesome. So just to keep in mind when these leftists talk about this, did you know, for example, that school lunches, they're not handled by the Department of Education. They're handled by the Department of Agriculture. So one would argue, well, wait a second, how did that happen? Because, that didn't seem to make sense. Well, one of the things that the president did over the weekend was start to farm stuff out. So student loans, which, by the way, prior to Obama had been a private function, he said, well, why don't we have the Small Business Administration that deals with loans a lot start to handle student loans? This is what they do largely. They are actually experts in this field. So we'll do that. And then what we'll do is we'll farm out the piece of this that helps children with disabilities to Health and Human Services, because they already do a lot of that. You get my point here is that instead of having one big bureaucracy with a ton of unaccountable, faceless bureaucrats that stand in the way between you and your kids' education, why don't we start to push some of this away to people who are probably better at doing it, and then the rest of it and the money gets block granted and goes to the states? It was just interesting because they don't want to actually tell you about how it's working, because the school tests are horrible. Our kids are not doing better, especially in the area of STEM, science, math. No. We spend more, we get less. So why not actually do something to affect change? But speaking of HHS, big news on the MAHA front. Secretary Kennedy doing a lot that I thought was pretty cool. One of the things that he did was, he acknowledged that he was going to handle this special needs aspect of it. But then he spent Friday bringing a bunch of kids in for World Down Syndrome Day. And it was a really cool event. He spent a bunch of time with them. His wife, Cheryl Hines, there with him as well. I thought that was pretty darn cool. And then he also announced this big thing called Operation Stork Speed. And it deals with baby food. I want to play you the clip and just give you a sense of what he's talking about here.
Hi, this is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. As Secretary of Health and Human Services, one of the agencies that I oversee is the Food and Drug Administration. The FDA is responsible for making sure that the food and medicine that Americans put into their body is safe. That's important for everyone, but especially for our children, because they're the most vulnerable, and the most vulnerable of all are our babies. If there's one food that must be safe beyond any doubt, it's infant formula. Mothers who cannot or choose not to breastfeed need to have absolute confidence that their infant formula is ideal for their babies and have many options to choose from. Parents and others who rely on infant formula should know what's in these products and how consuming them may impact their child's health. That's why I'm directing the FDA to launch Operation Stork Speed. Amongst many things, it will study infant formula to inform updates in federal guidelines. Let me tell you why we're doing this. You see, the science of human nutrition has progressed since current guidelines were put in place in 1998. So we're going to evaluate all the common ingredients from corn syrup solids to seed oils to make sure that they meet the needs of our little ones. Some things we know are bad, like heavy metals, so we're going to increase the frequency of testing to make sure that no child drinks contaminated formula. I met with the CEOs of all the top infant formula manufacturers a couple of days ago, and they're united in support of this initiative. They are ready to make whatever changes are needed based upon the current evidence, because no one wants our children to be sick. We all want our children to grow and flourish from the moment they're born. Make America Healthy Again is something that can unite all Americans. And that's what Operation Stork Speed is all about. We're going to make American infant formula the gold standard for the world.
You know, I can't believe it's taken since 1998. Think about this. How many infants rely on formula? We have to worry about what's in it. I mean, I never even thought about it. Maybe a lot of more mothers do that. I apologize. But I just assume it's on the shelf. It's got to be safe. You start to find out about metals and oils and all this stuff in the baby formula. Think about how that impacts development, mentally, physically. Thank God. I mean, for all the talk, this would have never gotten done on anybody else. Speaking of not getting done, one of the other things that he's doing is this thing that I've come to learn. It's called GRASS. Now, that's the acronym for it. Generally recognized as safe. This is absolutely insane, what I'm about to tell you. There is stuff, and that's the only way to describe it, stuff that we ingest that they never actually checked out and just said, all right, we'll generally recognize it as safe, even though we don't have any studies. Check out what he's saying about this. This is unbelievable. Again, generally recognized as safe is a government categorization. Check out what I'm talking about. This is Kennedy again.
Launched a review of the GRASS standards, and we're going to get rid of the GRASS standards for most products. The GRASS standards is a standard that was adopted in 1958. It was adopted because when FDA was created to regulate food, there were foods that were generally recognized as safe, GRAS, generally recognized as safe, like flour, like dairy, like eggs. And they didn't want to make companies test those products, so they created that designation. But that designation was expanded by an industry that began taking advantage of it so that any new chemical that they want to add to our food is generally recognized as safe and gets no review. Yeah. That's why we have 10,000 ingredients in our food in this country. In Europe, they only have 400. And we have the worst chronic disease burden of any country in the world. So we are going to get rid of the GRASS standards for new products. We're going to go back and review all of these old ingredients to make sure that they are safe. And we're going to encourage these companies to get rid of them as quickly as possible.
Great. So just to be clear, at one point, the government just said, all right, we're going to take all these ingredients and just assume they're safe. When you look at the side of a carton, and you wonder, what the heck is this and this and this and this? That's what I'm talking about. Those ones that you've never really understood. Where did this come from and what does it mean? And is it safe or not? The government at one point just sort of threw this category out and said, yeah, they're generally recognized. Do you understand how ridiculous that is? Like, we're just going to take all these ingredients, put them into a category, and that's what GRASS is, generally recognized as safe. Generally recognized. No study. I mean, you're putting stuff in your body that you don't know what it is. But the government has said, I think it's probably okay. That's literally the amount of science that went into it. Sounds good. You think it's all right? Hasn't hurt that many people? Let's just put it in. And for once, we're actually going to go back and look at it. I mean, between baby formula and this, you have to wonder. I'm one of those guys, like I said, I walk down the aisle, I see something, and I suddenly go, oh, it's on the shelf. It's got to be okay. The government let it on there. And you start to think about this. How did all this stuff happen? Over decades. Nobody thought to themselves, hey, maybe we should look into baby formula because there's metals in there. I wonder if metals are okay for a baby to ingest. You think we should ask someone about that? Maybe NIH, CDC, FDA? Nah, it's probably not a problem. What about these random products that we've never heard about before, these GRASS products? I don't know. Let's just call them generally recognized. This is the insanity of our government. And if it wasn't for Bobby Kennedy and the MAHA movement as part of the part of the MAGA movement, none of this would happen. No senators looking into this. No government officials blowing the whistle. But just ask yourself a simple question. Would you want to ingest half of this stuff knowing that no one's actually ever looked at it? Do you feel okay? Do you wonder why things are happening in the world these days in terms of rates of certain diseases in the last couple of decades when we allowed all this to happen? Because maybe there's a correlation. I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but I'm just saying maybe it's time that somebody looked into it. It's amazing it took this long. I'm just glad it's happening. All right. I want to tell you guys something that's just mind-blowing to me. We talked a lot about the Tesla takedowns. Okay. These are a bunch of leftist people funded at least partially by George Soros and others that are now taking out their absolute hatred of Elon Musk on Tesla dealerships, Tesla owners. I mean, I want to show you something. Take a look at these clips, if you will. Okay. Here are people vandalizing Teslas over and over and over again. I see them all the time on the internet, Twitter, Instagram, people getting called out for it. But do you notice something similar about each of these videos? I didn't pick it up at first. Start to think about this for a second. Look at the angle. It's all the same, isn't it? And you think to yourself, is some dude hidden in the parking lot over and over again, kind of getting this angle? Because I was thinking, again, sometimes you just it doesn't jump out at you. And then I started to go, why? Well, I got a smart team. We started to ask some smart questions. You know what's happening? The car is recording you, dum-dums. That's the answer. Yeah, the folks at Tesla are ahead of the curve, as always. If you own a Tesla, you probably are going, yeah, it's called Sentry mode. I didn't know this. I don't own a Tesla. But this is what Sentry mode is. It says, when enabled, your vehicle's cameras and sensors, if equipped, remain powered on and ready to record suspicious activity around your vehicle when the Model 3 is locked and in park. Think of Sentry mode as an intelligent vehicle security system that alerts you when it detects possible threats nearby. And once that happens, it pulses the headlights, it sounds an alarm, it displays the message on the touch screen that messages the cameras may be recording to inform individuals. It alerts you on the alarm of the mobile app, and it saves footage of the event to a USB drive if it's installed. So just stop and think about these numbnuts that are out there doing this, because they're clearly not that smart. They're trying to go after Elon by attacking private citizens' purchases, a great American company. But that's your way of expressing displeasure with Elon, is keying somebody's car or spreading your own feces on it or whatever disgusting thing that you think is funny. But the dumb thing about this is that if you're going to be part of this destruction of a great American company that, by the way, has revolutionized transportation, you're almost ensuring your own downfall, that you will be caught because you didn't realize, dummy, that it's recording you. So bravo, idiots. Keep it up, because I look forward to more stories like this. I hope if you are one of these people, you capture it and you share it. There is a dude who actually got caught within 24 hours of keying one of these cars and is charged with felony vandalism. Good. I'm glad. That's what should happen. Dan Bongino, the new deputy director over at the FBI, is saying that the FBI is starting to investigate these attacks on Tesla dealerships and cars. They should be. It's vandalism. It's intimidation. I don't know that it rises to the level of domestic terrorism, but I know that in my anecdotal conversations with people who own Teslas, they're afraid to drive them because you spend a lot of money on a car and the last thing you want is to be keyed or, have feces thrown at it. I get it. And it's considering the last administration, they wouldn't have been prosecuted. They would be let off. No record, no nothing. At least President Trump is taking this serious. He's saying that they're going to prosecute them. That's the difference. That's the thing, is that if you, under Biden, I get it. You knew that you could come into the country and nothing would happen. You knew that if you committed an act of violence or destruction or vandalism, you wouldn't get prosecuted. Or if you did one of these nutty protests at a university going against Israel, you'd be allowed to keep staying in school. Nothing would happen to you. You wouldn't get prosecuted. They need to show it's against the law. That's not the way you settle your differences. And by the way, why would you hurt another individual? It's not like you're going up to Elon's Tesla, which I still think is nuts. But you're going up to some random private citizen's car, keying it or destroying it or hitting on it or whatever you're doing. You should get prosecuted. You should go to jail. We need to set an example in this country that it's wrong. And the thing that's interesting to me is, for all the talk about every Democrat wants to say something about Trump, the Democrats have been largely silent on this issue, haven't they? Think about it. There's a guy who caused $3,000 worth of damage to a Tesla Model Y after he smashed it with a suitcase. It happened in California. And it's unbelievable because they're still trying to, at least as of this tweet, trying to find the guy. But I hope they do. And I hope that they prosecute him at a very serious level, because it's not just about him. It's sending a signal to everyone else that this is wrong. It's unbelievable. And the difference in leadership is what makes the difference. Under Biden, these people would have gotten away. We know that. But under President Trump, no way. All right. Before we go today, I want to share with you an interesting anecdote, a story from my experience. After we won in 2016, as we're getting ready in 2017 to take office, I come across this individual named Tony Dolan. Tony Dolan was coming into the speechwriting office. Now, I oversaw communications and press. Tony was working with the speechwriting team. Older gentleman, been around the block a few times, and sort of the old wise man, if you will. The guy who kind of would help give advice and lend a hand and guide people in the right direction. I got to know him. I thought pretty well. I always enjoyed his company. And even when I left the White House and I was going out on my own, Tony was always there with a kind word, with an offer to help, make an introduction, just who he was. And last week, Tony died. Now, I knew a little bit about his past, but the Hoover Institute put out a video with Peter Robinson and Christopher Buckley. You might know Christopher Buckley. They're both at Hoover. Christopher Buckley is the son of William F. Buckley. And they talked about working with Tony in the Reagan era. And Tony, at that time, was Reagan's chief speechwriter. Take a look at this conversation.
The great theme of those years was the true believers versus the pragmatists. And the true believers were the speechwriters and Ronald Reagan. And this was the theme. And I thought, he must be mad. And then he writes the Westminster Address. Listen to this. This is Tony Dolan. He is a historically important figure. Listen to this. These are the words that he wrote for Ronald Reagan. I have discussed on other occasions the elements of Western policy. This is before the British Parliament. Western policies toward the Soviet Union to safeguard our interests and protect the peace. What I am describing now is a plan and a hope for the long term. The march of freedom and democracy, which will leave Marxism, Leninism on the ash heap of history, which is twisting Trotsky.
Was that Trotsky?
I think it was Trotsky. Against
Trotsky or Lenin.
Trotsky or Lenin. Yeah. A brilliant line. And it turned out the senior staff fought that tooth and nail.
Well,
Tony had to go to...
You want to pull
unbelievable.
Your hair out.
And so it was true. It was the true believers versus the pragmatists. 1983. This is a Tony speech. So I urge you to speak out against, he's talking to the National Association of Evangelicals down in Florida, Orlando. I urge you to speak out against those who would place the United States in a position of military and moral inferiority. I urge you to beware the temptation of pride. This is to the National Association of Evangelicals. I urge you to beware the temptation of pride, the temptation of blithely declaring yourselves above it all and labeling both sides as equally at fault, of ignoring the facts of history and the aggressive impulses of an evil empire.
You get the picture. This is a historically important person. He wrote the Evil Empire speech. By the way, Peter Robinson, who is doing most of the talking there, under Tony's tutelage, wrote Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. The reason I tell you all this is I knew Tony as a very generous, kind person. I don't think I fully appreciated how impactful he was as Reagan's chief speechwriter. That's not what he did. He didn't walk around bragging. He was about no pomp, no circumstance, no ego. No tall tales about how it used to be. Most of what I know now, I learned after the fact about what an amazing guy he was. All I knew, he's a great friend, very supportive, kind, generous. And in a town where titles matter, power and access matter, that's not who he was. The reason I tell you this isn't just to honor his legacy. It's that I thought about Tony's passing the other day, and I thought, wow, I can't believe I didn't get to know the person better. I didn't take as much time as I should have. So if there's someone in your life that you think is a great friend, have those conversations while you still can. Ask them about their past, their situation. I wish I had gotten to know Tony better. I'm glad that I got to know him. I'm honored that I got to know him, but I wish I had known him better. And I say this because I think there are people in all of our lives that we can maybe spend a few more minutes getting to know, thanking them for what they're doing to us. I'll miss him. Anyway, the guys from what they call the fellas from the Ruthless Variety Program. You might have heard them. They will be with us tomorrow. Senator Ron Johnson Wednesday. Margaret Olahan from the Daily Wire. She'll be here on Friday with our good friend Seb Gorka. He's here on Friday. What a week is coming your way. And by the way, Haley Caranillo took over for Dan Bongino's show. She's going to join us as part of the panel on Thursday. What a week we've got coming your way. My newsletter at SeanSpicer.com drops tomorrow. Sign up now. It's free. A lot to get to this week. We're going to have it covered for you from every angle. Thanks for kicking off your week for us. We'll see you back here tomorrow on the Sean Spicer Show.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.